What if I told you that the most devastating phone call of someone's life led to the greatest love story ever? Stay with me, because today, I'm sharing the wildest wedding story you've ever heard, where betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected hero collide in the most incredible way. This is Emily, 28 years old, marketing director, and about to marry the man of her dreams. Or so she thought. Everything was perfect. The flowers, the music, the cake, a three-tier masterpiece that cost more than most people's cars. But perfection, as Emily was about to learn, is often just an illusion. Let me take you back 6 months earlier. Emily had met James at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital. She was there representing her marketing firm, having organized the silent auction that raised over $50,000 that night. James approached her during cocktail hour, complimenting her work and asking intelligent questions about nonprofit marketing strategies. He was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from success. He told her he was a financial advisor, specializing in wealth management for high-net-worth individuals. His business cards were thick, expensive cardstock. His watch was a Rolex. Everything about him screamed stability and success. Exactly what Emily thought she wanted, after a string of relationships with men who couldn't even commit to weekend plans. Their first date was at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. James arrived 20 minutes late, apologizing profusely and explaining that a client emergency had detained him. Emily found his dedication to his work admirable. He ordered wine without looking at the prices, insisted on paying the check, and walked her to her car like a perfect gentleman. Their relationship moved fast, maybe too fast. Within 3 months, James had proposed with a stunning diamond ring during a sunset dinner overlooking the city. Emily said yes without hesitation. The proposal felt like something out of a movie, complete with rose petals and a photographer James had secretly hired to capture the moment. "I can't believe this is real. He's everything I've ever wanted." Emily threw herself into wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone who had been dreaming of her perfect day since childhood. She created spreadsheets, Pinterest boards, and detailed timelines. Every weekend was consumed with venue visits, cake tastings, and dress fittings. The wedding planning consumed Emily's life. She quit her weekend pottery classes, canceled her monthly girls' trips, and devoted every free moment to creating their perfect day. Her friends joked that she'd become a bridezilla, but Emily didn't care. She was living her fairy tale. Her best friend Sarah tried to voice concerns about the pace of the relationship, but Emily brushed them off. When her mother gently suggested they wait a year before marrying, Emily accused her of not supporting her happiness. Looking back, Emily would realize that everyone who loved her had sensed something was off about James. James, meanwhile, seemed oddly detached from the planning. He'd nod and agree to everything, claiming he just wanted Emily to be happy. When she asked his opinion about flowers, he'd say, "Whatever you like." When she wanted to discuss the guest list, he'd change the subject. Red flag number 1. But love, as they say, is blind. There were other warning signs Emily chose to ignore. James never invited her to his apartment, always insisting they stay at her place because it was cozier. He was mysteriously unavailable every other weekend, claiming work obligations that seemed excessive even for a successful financial advisor. His phone was always face down, and he would step outside to take certain calls. When Emily suggested meeting his family, James became evasive. He claimed his parents lived overseas and his siblings were scattered across the country. He had no childhood friends to speak of, no college buddies who stayed in touch. For someone so charming and successful, his personal life seemed surprisingly isolated. The morning of June 15th started like a dream. Emily woke up in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by her bridesmaids, with sunlight streaming through the windows. She had slept surprisingly well for a bride-to-be, waking up refreshed and excited rather than nervous. The energy was electric. Her maid of honor, Sarah, was live-streaming the preparation on Instagram. Emily's mother was crying happy tears while helping her into the custom-designed dress that had taken 4 months to create. Her younger sister was carefully arranging Emily's grandmother's pearl necklace, continuing a family tradition that went back 3 generations. The makeup artist had arrived at 7 a.m., transforming Emily into a glowing version of herself. The photographer was capturing every moment, the champagne toast with the bridesmaids, The emotional moment when Emily's father first saw her in her dress, the careful placement of her great-grandmother's diamond hairpins. Everything was going according to plan. The weather was perfect, not a cloud in the sky. The flowers had arrived on time and were more beautiful than Emily had imagined. The musicians were setting up at the venue. The cake had been delivered without incident. For once in the chaotic months of wedding planning, everything seemed to be falling into place. Then, at exactly 9:47 a.m., I know the time because Emily would replay this moment in her mind for months. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Emily almost didn't answer, but something told her to pick up. Maybe it was a vendor with a last-minute question, or a guest calling about directions. Emily, you don't know me, but I know about James. I can't let you make the biggest mistake of your life. The voice was female, shaky, and clearly distressed. Emily's blood ran cold. Who is this? What are you talking about? My name is Rachel. James is already married. He's been married to my sister for 3 years. I have the marriage certificate. I have photos. I have everything. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. The room started spinning. Her bridesmaids noticed something was wrong, but Emily couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. The phone felt impossibly heavy in her hand. I'm sorry to do this today, but I couldn't watch you walk down that aisle. My sister doesn't know I'm calling you. She thinks James is away on business again, but I've seen the wedding announcement in the paper. I've been fighting with myself for weeks about whether to contact you. Contact me, Emily managed to whisper. Why would you wait until today? Because I hoped he would call it off himself. I hoped he would come to his senses. But when I saw the announcement this morning, when I realized you were actually going through with this, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I don't understand. This can't be real. Check your email. I'm sending you proof. I'm sending you their marriage certificate, photos from their wedding, photos from their anniversary last month. I'm sending you pictures of their daughter. Their daughter. The words came out as a croak. She's 2 years old. Her name is Lily. She has James's eyes. The phone went dead. Emily's hands shook as she opened her email. The evidence was undeniable. Marriage certificate dated 3 years ago. James Michael Patterson married to Lisa Marie Chen. The same James who had told Emily his full name was James Michael Peters. The photos were worse than the documents. Wedding photos showing James in a black tuxedo, smiling at a petite Asian woman in a traditional white gown. Anniversary photos from just 1 month ago. James and Lisa at what appeared to be an expensive restaurant, both wearing wedding rings that Emily had never seen before. Then there were the family photos. James holding a beautiful little girl with dark curls and his unmistakable smile. Lisa and James and Lily at the beach, at Christmas morning, at the little girl's second birthday party just 3 months ago. The woman in the photos looked nothing like Emily. Blonde where Emily was brunette, petite where Emily was tall, quiet and reserved where Emily was outgoing. It was as if James had been living 2 completely different lives with 2 completely different types of women. You might see is what's wrong. You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah had been watching Emily's face change from confusion to horror, to something approaching shock. He's married. James is already married. Emily's voice was barely audible, but in the small bridal suite, everyone heard her. What? That's impossible. You're getting married in 3 hours. He has a wife. He has a daughter. He's been lying to me about everything. Emily held up her phone, showing Sarah the photos. One by one, her bridesmaids gathered around, their faces reflecting the same disbelief Emily felt. What followed was 20 minutes of pure chaos. Sarah called James, straight to voicemail. Emily's father threatened to hunt James down and demand an explanation. Her mother suggested maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe the photos were old. Maybe there was some explanation that would make this nightmare make sense. But Emily knew. Deep down, all those red flags she'd ignored suddenly made perfect sense. The way James never wanted her to visit his apartment, because he lived with his wife and child. How he was always unavailable on certain weekends, because those were his family weekends. The mysterious business trips that never quite added up, because they weren't business trips at all. The phone calls he took outside weren't from demanding clients. They were from his wife, checking in, asking when he'd be home, asking him to pick up diapers or help with bedtime stories. Emily felt sick. She ran to the bathroom and barely made it before throwing up the mimosa and croissant she'd had for breakfast. Sarah held her hair back while Emily's world crumbled around her. How could I have been so stupid? she whispered between waves of nausea. "You're not stupid," Sarah said firmly. "You're trusting. You believed someone you loved. That's not stupid, that's human. But the signs were there, I ignored them all. Because you wanted to believe in love. Because you wanted to believe in him." By 10:30 a.m., with guests already arriving at the venue, Emily had to make a decision. Cancel everything and face the humiliation, or confront James at the altar and expose him publicly. Her father wanted her to call the whole thing off immediately. Her mother worried about the guests, the money they'd spent, the embarrassment of canceling at the last minute. Sarah, ever the practical one, suggested they handle this privately and announce the cancellation to the guests through the wedding coordinator. But Emily surprised everyone, including herself, with her decision. "I'm going to that altar," she announced, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. You can't marry him knowing what you know." "I'm not going to marry him. I'm going to expose him. In front of everyone. He doesn't get to humiliate me in private and then walk away clean." The drive to the venue was surreal. Emily sat in the back of the limousine she'd rented, still in her perfect dress, still wearing her grandmother's pearls, but now armed with the knowledge that her entire relationship had been a lie. Picture this: 150 guests, thousands of dollars in decorations, and a bride walking down the aisle not to marry her prince, but to confront her villain. The venue looked exactly as Emily had dreamed it would. White roses and baby's breath everywhere, candles flickering in crystal holders, a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Her guests were seated and smiling, phones ready to capture what they thought would be the happiest moment of Emily's life. James stood at the altar, confident and smiling, completely unaware that his world was about to crumble. He was wearing the tuxedo Emily had helped him select, the one that had cost more than her monthly rent. His boutonniere was perfectly placed. His hair was perfectly styled. He looked like the picture of a successful, happy groom. The officiant, Emily's family pastor who had baptized her as a baby and confirmed her as a teenager, sensed something was wrong the moment Emily reached the back of the aisle. He had known Emily her entire life, and the expression on her face was nothing like what he'd expected to see on her wedding day. But the music was playing, the guests were standing, and tradition demanded they proceed. Emily began her walk down the aisle. With each step, she felt stronger. With each step, her resolve grew. The guests smiled and dabbed at their eyes, thinking they were witnessing a beautiful moment. Emily's father, walking beside her, squeezed her arm in what he hoped was reassuring support. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Emily and James in holy matrimony." Emily reached the altar and looked James directly in the eyes. For just a moment, seeing his familiar face, she felt a flicker of doubt. This was the man who had held her when she cried about work stress, the man who had surprised her with her favorite takeout when she was sick, the man who had told her he loved her every single day for 6 months. But then she remembered the photos, the marriage certificate, the little girl with his eyes. "Before we go any further, I need to ask you something, James. Is there anything you want to tell me? Any commitments you might have forgotten to mention?" The congregation murmured. This wasn't part of traditional wedding vows. "Emily, what are you talking about? You're making people uncomfortable." James's voice was steady, but Emily could see something flickering in his eyes. Not confusion, recognition, fear. "Am I? Because I'm the one who's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the fact that you're already married. Uncomfortable that I'm standing here in front of everyone I love, about to marry a complete stranger." The murmur from the guests grew louder. People were shifting in their seats, pulling out their phones, whispering to each other. James's face went white. His best man, a man Emily now realized she'd never actually met before the rehearsal dinner, looked like he wanted to disappear. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. "Emily, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been lying to me for 6 months, how you're married with a child, how you were going to make me an accessory to bigamy." She reached into her bouquet and pulled out printed copies of the photos Rachel had sent. She held them up so James could see them, then turned to face their guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet James's real family, his wife Lisa and his daughter Lily. They think he's on a business trip this weekend." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Emily's grandmother gasped so loudly it echoed through the venue. Several guests stood up to get a better look at the photos. James's best man started backing away from the altar. James made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Emily, you're having some kind of breakdown. Let's go somewhere private and talk about this." But Emily was done being controlled, done being manipulated, done being the victim of his lies. A breakdown. The breakdown happened when I trusted you, when I believed your lies, when I ignored every red flag because I was so desperate to have my fairy tale ending that I overlooked the fact that you're a fraud. She turned to face their guests one final time. "I'm sorry everyone came here for nothing. The wedding is off. But please, stay for the reception. The food is already paid for. The band is here. And honestly, I could use the support of people who actually love me." James tried to approach her, tried to take her arm, but Emily stepped away from him. Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. Just leave. Go home to your real family and leave me alone." And amazingly, he did. James Michael Patterson, or Peters, or whatever his name actually was, walked out of Emily's life the same way he had entered it, with lies and deception. But this time, Emily was the one in control. Most of the guests left after the dramatic altar scene, but Emily's true friends and family stayed. About 40 people made their way to the reception hall, where the elaborate dinner Emily had planned was waiting. The reception became an impromptu support group, with Emily still in her wedding dress, eating what was supposed to be her wedding cake. The conversations were surreal. Emily found herself consoling guests who were traumatized by what they'd witnessed. Her elderly great-aunt kept asking if this meant there wouldn't be great-great-grandchildren anytime soon. Her college roommate was furious on Emily's behalf and kept threatening to track James down and make him pay. That's when Alexander Morgan walked in. Alexander was 32, tall and lean with kind brown eyes and the sort of understated confidence that comes from genuine accomplishment rather than arrogance. He was wearing a simple black suit, not a tuxedo, and he moved through the reception hall with the quiet efficiency of someone who was used to handling crises. Alexander was the CEO of Prestige Catering, the company Emily had hired for the reception. She had chosen them specifically because of their reputation for handling high-end events with discretion and professionalism. She had never expected to meet the CEO personally, but Alexander made it a point to oversee their most important events himself. "Ms. Carter, I'm Alexander Morgan. I heard what happened. I wanted to check on you personally." His voice was warm but professional. Emily looked up from the slice of wedding cake she'd been mechanically eating and saw genuine concern in his eyes, not the morbid curiosity that had been flickering across other faces all afternoon. "Oh, you're probably here about payment. Don't worry, I'll still pay for everything even though—" Emily's voice trailed off. Even though what? Even though her dream wedding had turned into a public nightmare. "Actually, no. I'm here because what you did today took incredible courage. I've been in this business for 8 years, and I've never seen someone handle betrayal with such grace. Grace? I just humiliated myself in front of 150 people. You exposed a liar and saved yourself from a marriage built on deception. That takes strength most people don't have." Alexander sat down across from Emily without being invited, which should have seemed presumptuous but somehow felt exactly right. "I know this might sound crazy, but would you like to get out of here? Still in the wedding dress, still with all this chaos, just somewhere quiet?" Something in his voice, his genuine concern, made Emily nod. Yes. For the first time all day, someone was offering her what she actually needed, instead of what they thought she should need. Alexander took Emily to a small coffee shop he owned in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the venue. It wasn't part of his catering empire, just a quiet place called The Daily Grind, where he went to think and decompress from the demands of running a successful business. Emily was still in her wedding dress, drawing stares from the few other customers, but Alexander somehow made it feel normal. He ordered her a large coffee with extra cream and a chocolate croissant, somehow knowing exactly what she needed even though they'd just met. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Maybe that's exactly why. Sometimes strangers can offer something friends and family can't, perspective without judgment. And then Alexander told Emily his story. 2 years earlier, his own fiancé had left him at the altar, not for another man, but because she realized she was more in love with his money than with him. Her name was Victoria, and she was everything Alexander had thought he wanted. Beautiful, sophisticated, well connected in all the right social circles. The truth came out during their rehearsal dinner, when Victoria had too much wine and started talking about their future plans. She mentioned the houses she wanted to buy, the trips she wanted to take, the lifestyle she expected Alexander's success to provide. When Alexander gently suggested they should probably budget and plan their expenses as a team, Victoria laughed and said she hadn't agreed to marry him to worry about money. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He replayed conversations he'd had with Victoria over their 2-year relationship and realized she had never once asked about his dreams, his goals, his fears, or his hopes for their future together. Every conversation had been about what his success could provide for her. He called off the wedding the next morning. Victoria was furious, not heartbroken. She threatened to sue him for the cost of the dress, the venue, the embarrassment. She never once said she loved him or that she would miss him. I realized that day that being alone was better than being with someone who saw me as a bank account rather than a person. Emily understood completely. She had been so focused on the fantasy of marriage that she had ignored the reality of who James actually was. They talked until the coffee shop closed at 9 p.m. Emily learned that Alexander had built his catering business from nothing after his parents died in a car accident when he was 25. He had used his small inheritance to buy a food truck and worked 18-hour days for 3 years before he could afford to open his first restaurant. Success had made it hard to trust people's motives. Too many people were interested in what Alexander could provide, rather than who he was as a person. He had learned to be cautious about relationships, to take things slowly, to pay attention to red flags. Emily opened up about her relationship with James, how she'd ignored warning signs because she was so desperate to have her fairy tale ending. She talked about the pressure she felt to be married by 30, the way her friends' weddings had made her feel left behind, the relief she'd felt when James proposed because it meant she was finally on track. Can I tell you something? What happened to you today wasn't a disaster. It was a rescue. A rescue? You could have married him. You could have found out years from now, maybe after having kids, maybe after building a life on a lie. Today was painful, but it saved you from something much worse. For the first time since the morning, Emily smiled. A real smile. You know what the worst part is? I'm not even sure I loved him. I think I loved the idea of him. I loved the way our life looked on paper. That's more honest than most people would be willing to admit. What started as a rescue became a friendship, and what started as friendship became something deeper, though neither of them rushed into anything romantic. Alexander didn't try to be Emily's rebound. Instead, he became her friend, her confidant, and slowly, the person who helped her heal from James's betrayal. Over the following weeks, Alexander introduced Emily to parts of the city she'd never seen. They visited art galleries and farmers' markets. They went to small concerts in intimate venues. They took long walks through neighborhoods Emily had driven through but never explored. Emily helped Alexander realize that not everyone was interested in his money. She asked about his childhood, his dreams, his favorite books and movies. She remembered details about his stories and asked follow-up questions the next time they talked. She was genuinely interested in him as a person, not as a provider. They were healing each other without even realizing it. 3 months after her wedding day disaster, Emily got a call from James. His voice was different, less confident, more pleading. Emily, I need to see you. I need to explain everything. James, I don't think, please. Just give me 30 minutes. Let me explain what happened, why I did what I did. Emily almost hung up immediately, but curiosity won. She agreed to meet him at a neutral location, the same coffee shop where Alexander had taken her on her wedding day. James looked terrible. He had lost weight. His expensive clothes hung loosely on his frame, and he had dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, Emily felt a flicker of sympathy. Lisa filed for divorce, he said without preamble. I'm sorry to hear that, Emily replied, though she wasn't entirely sure she meant it. She found out about you, about us. Rachel told her everything. James went on to explain that his marriage to Lisa had been troubled for over a year. They had married young when Lisa got pregnant, and James had felt trapped in a life he never wanted. He claimed he had been planning to ask Lisa for a divorce when he met Emily, but then he fell for Emily so hard and so fast that he convinced himself he could manage both relationships until he figured out how to cleanly end his marriage. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said. "I was going to tell you everything after the honeymoon. I was going to ask Lisa for a divorce and make everything right." Emily listened for exactly 30 minutes, then stood up to leave. "You know what, James? I don't need your explanations anymore. I don't need closure from you. I have closure from myself. But Emily, you're a coward. You had multiple opportunities to tell me the truth, and you chose deception every single time. You would have let me marry you knowing you were committing bigamy. You would have let me build a life on a lie. I was scared of losing you. You never had me. You had an idea of me, a version of me that fit into your fantasy life. But you never knew the real me, because real relationships are built on honesty." Emily walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than she had in months. That evening, she called Alexander and told him about the meeting with James. "You know what? I'm proud of you." "Why?" "Because 6 months ago, you would have given him another chance. You would have believed his excuses and convinced yourself that love could overcome anything. Today, you chose yourself. That's the strongest thing I've ever heard anyone say." By month 4, Emily and Alexander both knew their friendship had developed into something deeper. They had been spending most of their free time together, talking every day, sharing hopes and dreams and fears in ways that felt both comfortable and electric. But Alexander, ever the gentleman, waited for Emily to make the first move towards something romantic. One evening in October, exactly 4 months after her disastrous wedding day, Emily showed up at Alexander's office unannounced. He was working late, reviewing contracts for a major corporate event. When she knocked on his door, "I have something to tell you. I think I'm falling in love with you, and it's terrifying. But it's also the most real thing I've felt in years." Alexander stood up from his desk, walked around to where Emily was standing, and took her hands in his. "Emily, I've been in love with you since that first day in the coffee shop. I was just waiting for you to be ready." Their first kiss happened in Alexander's office, surrounded by catering contracts and wedding planning folders, and it was perfect in a way that Emily's elaborate wedding plans never could have been. 1 year to the day after her wedding disaster, Emily stood in the same venue, but this time, everything was different. The guest list was smaller, just 60 people who truly mattered to both Emily and Alexander. The decorations were simpler but more elegant: white peonies instead of roses, string lights instead of crystal chandeliers. The whole atmosphere felt intimate and genuine rather than performative. Emily's dress was different too. Instead of the elaborate gown with the cathedral train, she wore a simple but stunning sheath dress that made her feel beautiful rather than costumed. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that Alexander had picked from his mother's garden that morning. This time, when Emily walked down the aisle, she wasn't nervous about perfection. She was excited about her future. She could see Alexander waiting for her at the altar, and his face showed none of the false confidence James had displayed. Instead, she saw genuine emotion, real love, honest anticipation. The ceremony was performed by the same pastor who had officiated Emily's first attempted wedding. He had counseled both Emily and Alexander extensively before agreeing to marry them, wanting to ensure that this union was built on a foundation of truth and mutual respect. "Emily, do you take Alexander to be your husband, to love and honor him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do, and I mean it this time." Laughter rippled through the small congregation, not the nervous tittering of an uncomfortable audience, but the warm laughter of people who loved Emily and were genuinely happy to see her find real love. Alexander's vows were simple and heartfelt. "Emily, you taught me that sometimes the best love stories start with the worst days. Thank you for letting me be part of your beautiful, imperfect, real life. I promise to always tell you the truth, to support your dreams and to love you exactly as you are." When they kissed as husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. Emily felt a joy she hadn't known was possible, not the desperate relief of finally getting what she thought she wanted, but the deep satisfaction of choosing something real and true. The reception was held at Alexander's first restaurant, a cozy bistro with exposed brick walls and fairy lights strung from the ceiling. Instead of a formal sit-down dinner, they had a casual buffet featuring all of Alexander's favorite recipes. Instead of a DJ, They had a small acoustic band that played songs Emily and Alexander both loved. The whole celebration felt like a party thrown by people who genuinely wanted to be there, rather than a performance for an audience. During their first dance, Emily whispered to Alexander, "This feels right. Everything about us feels right." Emily's story teaches us that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. That betrayal, while painful, can lead us to truth. And that real love, the kind worth having, often comes from the most unexpected places. The wedding disaster that had seemed like the worst day of Emily's life had actually been the beginning of the best chapter of her life. If James hadn't been exposed for the fraud Emily would never have met Alexander. She would never have learned the difference between the fantasy of love and the reality of love. James, by the way, never did get that divorce from Lisa. The last Emily heard, he was working as a car salesman in another state, his financial advising license revoked after Lisa reported his fraudulent activities to the state licensing board. Some stories don't have justice, they have something better. They have growth, healing, and new beginnings. 2 years after their wedding, Emily and Alexander welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Hope. 3 years after that, they had a son they named David, after Alexander's father. They built a life together that was everything Emily's first relationship had pretended to be: honest, supportive, and filled with genuine love. Emily often reflects on how different her life would have been if that phone call from Rachel had never come. She would have married James, probably would have found out about his deception eventually, but only after years of building a life on lies. The pain of discovery would have been multiplied by children, shared finances, and deeper entanglement. Instead, that devastating phone call became the catalyst for Emily finding her real happiness. Rachel, the sister-in-law who had risked family drama to save a stranger from making a terrible mistake, became one of Emily's closest friends. Lisa, James's first wife, eventually thanked Emily for exposing James's fraud, admitting that she had suspected something was wrong, but hadn't known how to prove it. The venue where Emily's first wedding fell apart and her second wedding succeeded now holds special meaning for both Emily and Alexander. They return there every year on their anniversary, not to relive the drama, but to celebrate the courage it took for Emily to choose truth over fantasy. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your life's direction? Sometimes the most devastating phone calls, the most public humiliations, the most painful betrayals turn out to be the universe's way of redirecting us toward our real happiness. Share your stories of unexpected beginnings below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible real-life tales, because sometimes the best stories are the ones that start with, "This is the worst day of my life," and end with, "I can't imagine my life any other way." Emily's wedding disaster became her greatest blessing, proving that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to find everything you actually need.